It's a sunny, warm Saturday afternoon. You're standing in the brightly lit aisles of the Eau Leclerc supermarket in Carpentras, a picturesque town in the south of France. The smell of freshly baked bread fills the air of the store. You're pushing a cart, checking items off your weekend grocery list, completely wrapped up in the mundane rhythm of this beautiful day. Next to you, a woman is looking at a shelf, trying to decide what to buy. And then you notice him. An older gentleman, white hair, friendly eyes. He looks like a typical grandfather, the kind of man who's been married to his high school sweetheart for nearly 50 years or something like that. He's carrying a grocery basket, blending perfectly into the background of his quiet retirement in Provence. But as you watch, something feels wrong. Something in the atmosphere shifts. The man begins moving, slowly. He moves a little too close to the woman next to you. What is he doing, you wonder? His hand goes into his pocket. He subtly pulls out his phone and moves it downward, sliding it beneath the hem of her skirt. Before your brain can even fully process this horror you're witnessing, a sharp voice cuts through the hum of the supermarket. It's the store's security guard. He has been watching on the CCTV cameras, he reveals in a steely voice. He confronts the white-haired man, demanding his phone, while the women in the aisle look on, startled and unsure of exactly what's happening. What is this guard going to do? You can see on the faces of the women that they wonder if he's making a scene over nothing, or is this innocent old man actually a predator, as the guard seems to be implying. You watch as the security guard leads the white-haired old man into the back room of the supermarket. You grab your bags, walk out to your car, and drive home. What a bizarre, unsettling incident on what was the perfect Saturday afternoon. You think, what the fuck was that, to yourself, and move on. A few days pass, then a few weeks. You completely forgot about the old man in the polo shirt and shorts. But almost 2 months later, in early November, you're scrolling through your phone, half watching TV before bed. And then you see something on the TV that makes you freeze. A photo of that old man from the supermarket months ago. The newscaster tells you that the local police just finished reviewing the phones and decrypting the hard drives that were in the man's possession. And that the police didn't just find upskirt photos on them. They found an entire digital archive, meticulously organized under a single folder titled Abuse. You learn that the man's name is Dominique Pellicot. It seems as though, when police eventually brought him into the police station from the supermarket incident, they seized his mobile phone and computer. The newscaster continues to explain that, hidden within these files, police found horrifying photographic and video evidence detailing a nearly decade-long nightmare. They discovered that the man, Dominique, has been secretly, heavily sedating his wife and recruiting dozens upon dozens of strangers to come into their home to sexually assault her while she lay completely unconscious. I'm Nicole Davenport, and this is Great in the Sack, when misogyny leads to mayhem. Today we're talking about the Giselle Pellicot case, online rape academies, and the many problems of living in the digital age of misogyny. There is a huge content warning for this episode. It's incredibly heavy. We will be discussing sexual assault, chemical submission, deepfake pornography, digital blackmail, and suicide. Please use discretion when listening. Now, to understand the magnitude of the Pellicott case, we're going to look at the foundation it was built on top of. A 50-year marriage that appeared from the outside to be perfect. Giselle and Dominique met in 1971 as teenagers. They both came from difficult childhoods and quickly became each other's refuge, marrying in 1973. For decades, they survived the chaotic ups and downs of life together. Together, they weathered a lot of financial instability, massive debts, and Dominique's career failures. Yet to their friends, family, and neighbors, they were the ultimate success story. They hosted vibrant dinner parties and cultivated the public image of the perfect couple. But beneath that picture-perfect image lay a complex psychological leverage. In the mid-1980s, Giselle had a 3-year affair with a colleague that led to a temporary separation. Though they reconciled, that crack in the marriage shifted the power dynamic of their relationship. For the decades that followed, Giselle carried with her an unrelenting desire to try to redeem herself, spending the rest of her marriage showing her complete devotion and loyalty to Dominique. She thought she was protecting what they had fought to save. She had no idea that her devotion and the trust she was trying to rebuild was exactly what Dominique would weaponize to turn their home into a living nightmare. Now let's fast forward to their retirement years in the picturesque southern French town of Maison. It was here that Giselle began experiencing a terrifying, unexplainable physical decline. She suffered from severe blackouts and chronic fatigue. She began to experience such extreme memory lapses that she feared she was developing Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, or even a brain tumor. Her cognitive state deteriorated to the extent that she even stopped driving alone, and on train rides to see her grandchildren, she would have to pinch her own thighs to force herself to stay awake. But the nightmare wasn't just in her mind. She felt like she was living it. Giselle also began suffering severe discomfort and mysterious gynecological problems. Desperate for answers, as one would be, she consulted 3 different gynecologists. She testified in court that she would frequently wake up in her pajamas, completely soaked, a jarring sensation she described as feeling as though her water had broken, just like it does before giving birth. And through this whole decade, Dominique played the role of the doting, fiercely supportive partner. He even accompanied her to every single neurologist and gynecologist appointment, holding her hand and reassuring her. Now, what I feel is in a kind of sick, twisted display of psychological manipulation. He would even joke with her about her physical state, asking her, "But what are you doing at night?" cruelly implying that she was sneaking out and having affairs. But as the world now knows, Dominique had been stockpiling prescription tranquilizers like lorazepam and zolpidem, hiding them inside a sock, stuffed into a hiking boot in his garage. He would crush these powerful sedatives into her mashed potatoes, ice cream, coffee, or beer. He perfected the dosage to ensure she would be completely comatose for exactly 7 hours, just enough time for him to invite strangers into their home to sexually assault her. When police finally seized his hard drives, they uncovered his filing system of horrors. They found that Dominique had orchestrated an entire system for this abuse, including strict rules for the men that he recruited. In order to participate, perpetrators had to park their cars far away to avoid waking the neighbors and undress immediately in the kitchen. Before entering the bedroom, they were forced to wash their hands, clip their fingernails short, and warm their hands on the radiator so that their touch wouldn't be freezing cold and risk waking her up. They were forbidden from smoking, drinking, or wearing aftershave. Horribly enough, condoms were not required and even discouraged. A sick rule that left Giselle with 4 lifelong STDs, which explained the gynecological issues. The police quickly realized Dominique's depravity wasn't limited to his wife. Using DNA evidence, they connected him to the 1999 attempted rape of a 19-year-old real estate agent, which he later confessed to. Investigators also looked into his potential connection to the eerily similar 1991 rape and murder of another young real estate agent. When the trial began, Giselle made an incredibly brave decision. She waived her right to anonymity, demanding an open court so that, quote, shame could change sides, end quote. Inside that courtroom, 50 co-defendants sat alongside Dominique, and while investigators had identified 72 suspects who had visited the home over the years, around 20 of those men were never located and remain at large. Yikes. Faced with thousands of video files, the defense leaned into a kind of ridiculous narrative. Most of the 50 men claimed that they were tricked. They argued that Dominique made it sound like a consensual swingers game. They testified that they believed Giselle was simply shy, that she was just pretending to be asleep, and that this was a part of their little game. But here's the thing. The mechanics of these digital spaces where these men gathered tells a completely different, much darker story. These men, they weren't stumbling and falling into some misunderstanding. Chemical submission is the phrase being used to describe the criminal acts that these men were perpetrating. But when I first learned about chemical submission and men sharing instructions on dosages and scheduling times to violate unconscious women, my mind automatically went to the dark web. You know, encrypted browsers, cryptocurrency, that sort of thing. But the reality is way worse, because these spaces are hiding in plain sight. They're operating in totally accessible areas of the internet, found on unmoderated platforms, specific subreddits, websites like motherless.com, and private networks like a Telegram group called Z's, as in sleep. And this type of content is built entirely around incapacitation. Many of these apps are apps that can be found on our phones right this minute. To the casual observer, though, the front door to these online areas does look locked. But to a predator, it's an easy-to-access, multi-step pipeline designed to separate the casual lurkers from the active participants. In a recent investigative documentary titled Sleeping with the Enemy, journalists infiltrated these exact global networks to map out how these men operate. They found that entry isn't granted just by asking. To get past the initial digital lobby, you have to go through a strict vetting process to prove you are, in fact, one of them. First, a user enters a public gateway channel. But to gain access to the private, unmoderated inner circles, where the actual inner workings and how-tos of chemical submission are discussed, the group administrators, or automated bots, demand a buy-in. You cannot just watch, you have to participate, to produce. These gatekeepers demand proof of your alignment with them. To get a permanent link to the inner rooms, a user is often forced to upload so-called tributes, non-consensual images or videos of women from their real lives, classmates, co-workers, or wives. The entry fee into this digital space is literally the violation of an unsuspecting woman's privacy. And once inside, you aren't just accepted either. It is super performance-based. Not only do these men share material, they actively rank and critique and even push each other toward more extreme acts. In these spaces, a user gains digital clout by proving that their content isn't some staged, acted-out performance with a willing partner. They have to prove that the woman is truly incapacitated. Now, to provide this sick authenticity check, perpetrators will literally perform what they refer to as an eye check on camera. This means that they lift the unconscious victim's eyelids to show everyone their victim's completely dilated, unresponsive pupils. An investigation into the site Motherless alone revealed over 20,000 videos featuring this exact type of sleep content. So, these men in the Pellicott case, they weren't confused, not at all. The total lack of consent and consciousness was like the currency of this community, along with the thrill that they were actively performing for each other. They also seemed to feed on the collective energy of the abuse, using these digital spaces to normalize taking a woman's body without her consent, to earn the creepy validation of their peers. Now, this abuse went undetected for an entire decade. So now we're going to take a look at the digital infrastructure that made it all possible. Dominique Pellicott found these men on the internet, not some dark alley at 2 a.m. like one might imagine. He operated primarily on a French-language platform called Coco, accessed via coco.fr, an online chat website that was entirely free and required no registration. It also allowed its users to remain completely anonymous. Inside this unmoderated platform, Dominique frequented a specific chat room literally called à son insu, which translates to without her knowledge. His recruitment process was incredibly well thought out. He would post messages like, "I'm looking for a pervert accomplice to abuse my wife who's been put to sleep," and share photos of an unconscious Giselle. Once he made a connection with a willing participant on the site, he would move the conversation over to Skype and message over how to coordinate the logistics of the assault. For years, this site, coco.fr, operated with little to no moderation, serving as what child protection advocates called a hunting ground for predators. But the true scale of the site's depravity was finally revealed on June 25, 2024, when the Paris Public Prosecutor's Office shut the platform down and seized its servers. Authorities disclosed a staggering and shocking fact that between January 2021 and May 2024 alone, the platform had been linked to nearly 23,000 judicial proceedings. The site had facilitated a massive underworld of criminal activity ranging from the mass rapes of Giselle Pellicott in Mazan to violent homophobic traps, drug trafficking, and child exploitation. In June 2024, French authorities officially shut down the Coco platform. But just who was running this digital academy? A French-born internet entrepreneur named Isaac Steidl. Steidl had renounced his French nationality, became an Italian citizen, and was quietly living in Eastern Europe while his platform facilitated countless crimes. His time finally ran out in January 2025 when he was taken into custody by French law enforcement in Paris around 4 years after Dominique Pellicott was arrested. The reclusive founder was hit with a massive array of criminal charges, including complicity in rape, aggravated money laundering, drug trafficking, and the possession and distribution of child sexual abuse material, CSAM. Investigators completely dismantled his financial network and freezed his bank accounts across Hungary, Germany, Lithuania, and the Netherlands. They also confiscated over 5 million euros globally from this guy. Now, you would think that that would be the end of the story. But right now, in the year of our Lord 2026, something else happened. In April, the website attempted a blatant rebirth, relaunching under the name Cocoland, with the exact same interface as its predecessor. Utilizing server loopholes, the new site is reportedly hosted on Australian islands. The reappearance sparked immediate outrage, prompting the Paris public prosecutor to open a brand new investigation into the platform. As France's Commissioner for Children, Sarah El Harry, stated upon its rebirth, the reopening of the site felt like, quote, a real slap in the face to the promise of protection that we've made. Now, the core currency of the sleep content communities we just discussed is about the absolute erasure of consent. It is the thrill of taking not only a woman's image, but also her autonomy without her ever knowing. But I mean, we don't have to look at the darkest, most disturbing corners of the internet, or even illegal, unmoderated chat rooms to see this exact same violation happening right now, in broad daylight, using tech that you can buy down the street at the mall. Tech giants like Meta have partnered with brands like Ray-Ban and Oakley to release the latest generation of AI-powered smart glasses. Unlike a smartphone, where it is incredibly obvious if someone is holding a camera in front of your face, these look virtually indistinguishable from regular eyewear. Meta claims the glasses have a small LED light that activates when recording, but the internet is already flooded with tutorials on how to easily tape over this pesky light or modify the glasses into stealth mode. Because of how easily they are abused, critics and privacy advocates have, in my opinion, accurately dubbed them pervert glasses. And of course, a growing wave of creeps and wannabe pickup artists are now using these glasses to prowl city areas and nightlife strips, even beaches, turning real-life encounters with unsuspecting women into viral content. They follow a kind of script. They approach a woman, drop a pickup line, and try to extract personal information while secretly recording the entire interaction. The footage is then blasted across TikTok and Instagram for millions of views, often without the subject ever realizing she was on camera until the video has already gone viral. Okay, so let's look at the story of 21-year-old Dilara. She was simply on her lunch break in London when a tall man got into an elevator with her and said, quote, "I swear red hair means you've just been heartbroken," before asking her number. Dilara had no idea she was being filmed until a friend sent her the video the next day. It had already racked up 1.3 million views on TikTok. Because these creeps are actively trying to extract personal information on camera, Dilara's actual phone number was visible in the viral video. She was bombarded for weeks with constant calls and harassment in the middle of the night, and men even showed up at her workplace. Then there's Kim, a 56-year-old woman who was sunbathing on a beach in West Sussex. A man wearing sunglasses approached her and complimented her bikini. Being polite, she chatted with him completely unaware she was being recorded, and shared personal details about her family and her employer. He posted the covert footage under the guise of dating advice, and it amassed 6.9 million views, resulting in Kim receiving thousands of sexually explicit and degrading messages from strangers online. This technology is entirely shifting the power dynamic in public spaces, and the privacy violations go far beyond awkward pickup attempts. An investigation by Swedish newspapers revealed that footage captured on Meta glasses frequently includes people using the bathroom, undressing, and even engaging in sex, all recorded without the subjects even realizing it. And where does that footage go? It is actually actively reviewed by human contractors in Kenya, who are tasked with training Meta's AI systems. These outsourced workers reported seeing a steady stream of highly sensitive and intimate clips, exposing everything from bank cards and private conversations to completely naked bodies. While the tech companies claim that they have safeguards to blur faces, workers admit that the system frequently fails, leaving people fully identifiable to strangers thousands of miles away. And this is just what we know is happening. These viral videos of women on the street, that's just what we're allowed to see. This is what's being proudly posted for engagement and online clout. But if they're willing to post that publicly, imagine the things these men are recording that we don't know about. Think about the footage hoarded in private folders, right? Moments where there is absolute vulnerability, captured in fitting rooms or gym locker rooms, even public restrooms. Women already have to navigate the world with a heightened awareness of their physical safety. Now they're being forced to wonder if they're being covertly recorded for consumption at any given moment. So wearable tech is even allowing men to steal a woman's reality in public, and let's face it, probably private too, without her ever knowing. But now we're going to shift to generative AI, which now allows them to manufacture a completely non-consensual reality. You see, the deepfake epidemic targets a wide variety of people. At first, you're probably thinking, yeah, celebrities, right? But it's become much more common now. There have been many cases with creators and streamers, such as QT Cinderella and Amaranth. Okay, so in 2023, the streaming community was rocked when Twitch streamer Brandon Ewing, known online as Atrioc, accidentally revealed his browser during a live stream, showing he was paying for a subscription site that hosted non-consensual, sexually explicit deepfakes of his female peers. Thank you, internet sleuths and netizens. He later issued a tearful apology, blaming his actions on morbid curiosity. Now, this scandal highlights a toxic entitlement directed at women with an online presence. Since their inception, deepfakes have been weaponized as a way to control and own women's bodies. The cultural attitude effectively becomes, well, she's online, therefore she's public domain. Fighting through tears, QT Cinderella expressed the devastating reality of this mindset to her audience when she live-streamed just after the incident had occurred. She said, quote, "This is what it looks like to feel violated. This is what it looks like to feel taken advantage of. This is what it looks like to see yourself naked against your will being spread all over the internet." But this type of violation also pipelines directly from famous streamers to ordinary campus life, for example. In 2020, an engineering student with the pseudonym Taylor discovered her face superimposed onto explicit content online, and she soon teamed up with another woman that she discovered deepfakes of that also happened to go to her university to track down the perpetrator. There were also several other young women who went to their university on this perp's 4chan page, amongst a few other places. Yep, 4chan. The culprit wasn't some faceless anonymous hacker either. Taylor and Julia, the pseudonym of the other woman, all of the names in this case are pseudonyms, by the way, narrowed the suspects down to 3 men from their school, ultimately discovering a deeply personal betrayal. The perpetrator was Mike, a needy, emotionally toxic former friend who had literally lived as a roommate in their circle. After his friendship with the group of friends had soured, he weaponized the women's faces. He hid behind the poor little boy facade of mental health struggles and mommy issues while secretly acting as a malicious cyber predator. They were able to successfully triangulate him using another woman named Sadie, a high school friend who had zero connection to their university, but was also found on dude's 4chan page. Mike was the only common denominator who knew both the university group and Sadie, proving he was the one generating the material. This betrayal ultimately helped to lead others to uncover a much larger structure responsible for the distribution of deepfake porn. Now, I know what you might be thinking. It's not really porn, and I completely agree with you. But unfortunately, this is the name that stuck for it. But what it's actually called is AI-generated, non-consensual, sexually explicit material. So, yeah, deepfake porn is what stuck, unfortunately. But here is the most infuriating part of this entire story. Taylor and Julia did the work. They played detective. They mapped out the connections and found the smoking gun linking Mike to the deepfake images on 4chan. They handed the info over to the police. And what did the justice system do? If you answered nothing, congratulations. Because in the eyes of the state, Mike used computer codes instead of his hands, so no crime had been committed. So when police called him, it's not like he confessed. And so, they had no legal right to touch his hard drives. He actually thanked the officers for how smoothly they handled the situation. This is why we have to use pseudonyms here. This is why their real names aren't out there. Because the system didn't protect the victims. They had to protect themselves when telling their own story. But the predator, well, he got to keep his anonymity, his clean record, and his freedom. And the deepfake crisis, as we all probably imagined it eventually would, has now moved from personal revenge to institutional extortion. So, organized cybercriminals have begun collecting innocent photos of pupils directly from UK secondary school websites. Using AI nudification tools, they create hyper-realistic CSAM of young girls, and then blackmail the schools for massive financial payouts under the threat of publishing the images. Former National Policing Lead for Child Protection, Simon Bailey, warned that this online sexual abuse of children is now reaching pandemic levels. And now that we understand exactly how harmful deepfake pornography is increasingly becoming, my question is, where are all these men getting the software, the forums, and the audience to do this shit? Okay, so here is what was uncovered thanks to the work of Taylor and Julia. Investigative journalists were able to trace the largest repository of deepfake porn, which is called MrDeepfakes.com, to its source. The architect was David Doe, a quiet, mild-mannered hospital pharmacist from the Toronto area, who was tracked down and confronted on the streets by CBC reporter Eric Seto. You see, Doe provided the central infrastructure for this global weapon, creating the community hub where guys like Mike traded tips, software, and videos. Doe's MrDeepfakes.com empire amassed over 2 billion views before the site was finally shut down in May 2025. But despite the massive scale of the abuse, victims frequently face a cultural apathy that shrugs off the violation because it's just pixels. As Dutch politician Caroline van der Plas powerfully stated regarding the phenomenon, "For me, it feels like you're being digitally raped." David Doe's synthetic porn empire permanently collapsed in May of 2025, but the cultural damage was already done. He had successfully spread the technology over a number of years, proving that a digital file could be used to violate a woman's autonomy without ever even coming into contact with her. And that exact playbook of digital captivity has mutated into our final area of digital misogyny, which consists of the coercion of young girls to photograph themselves and the subsequent blackmailing that follows. A trap designed to slide right past parental supervision and lock young people into an emotionally abusive, trauma-filled cage. This weaponization against young people and children is known as internet grooming, and also as sextortion. What we are talking about next here is a solo predator type of thing, which has been ongoing now for as long as one could upload photos to the internet. Around 2009, a single adult operating from across the world, a Dutch-Turkish national named Aydin Koban, targeted Canadian 7th grader Amanda Todd, who enjoyed using a popular webcam streaming service called Blog TV to hang out with and make more friends. Koban, using what looked like a teenager's account, began grooming her by constantly complimenting her, slowly building up trust, as predators do. He eventually wore her down with this behavior, pestering her to, quote, flash her breasts. Just to get him to stop badgering her over it, she relented. He then captured images of her exposing herself on her webcam and used it to blackmail her. And just like that, this supposedly friendly, trusting relationship quickly disappeared, replaced by a bullying pedophile. The predator relentlessly tracked her real-world movements. Every time her family moved to a new city or she changed schools to escape, he would find her again. He created fake Facebook profiles, including one that used her topless photo as the profile image, and posed as a new student to friend her classmates, systematically spreading her explicit images to her peers, her teachers, and her parents. Instead of receiving empathy for being coerced and emotionally abused by an adult, Amanda was severely stigmatized and relentlessly bullied by her cohorts. This bullying and abuse by her peers escalated into physical violence when a group of about 15 students confronted her at school. During the altercation, she was punched, fell to the ground, and was left lying in a ditch until her father found her. The trauma led Amanda to attempt suicide by drinking bleach, but after surviving and having her stomach pumped, she returned home only to find abusive Facebook messages mocking her attempt. She was continually taunted by other students for her depression and time spent at the hospital. This unrelenting digital and physical torment culminated on October 10th, 2012, when 15-year-old Amanda died by suicide by hanging at her home. Just a month before her death, she uploaded a heartbreaking YouTube video using flashcards to silently explain her experiences with blackmail, bullying, and self-harm. This case served as a wake-up call, proving that children were not safe online, that a predator in Europe could destroy a child's life in North America with an internet connection, and it highlighted the fatal consequences of society stigmatizing the victims of online abuse. And now we're going to move from the isolated acts of a single predator to an almost commercialized network. Between late 2018 and March 2020, a cybersex trafficking ring known collectively as the Nth Room case emerged in South Korea. The whole thing began in 2018 with a 24-year-old university student operating under the online alias God, later identified by law enforcement as Moon Hyung-wook. He mainly operated using the encrypted messaging application Telegram, and God was like a technical architect. He created a system of 8 locked, numbered chat channels, which were referred to as the Nth Rooms. This is where he honed in on his skills of catfishing, logging IPs, and blackmailing young girls into producing non-consensual content. But when God abruptly walked away from the platform in early 2019 to focus on his university exams, he left a massive vacuum. A wave of copycat channels invaded the area to try to claim the territory. The most ruthless and severe mutation to emerge from this power struggle was the doctor's room, which was referred to as Baksabang in Korean. This specific network was orchestrated by an operator using the online alias Baksa, the doctor, later identified by law enforcement as 25-year-old Cho Ju-bin, where the original creator, God, had built the basic digital infrastructure of the place. The doctor stepped in to almost industrialize it. The infrastructure of the doctor's room relied on corporate-style monetization and data management. Cho Ju-bin obtained the personal data, addresses, and resident registration numbers of his targets by posting fraudulent, high-paying advertisements for modeling gigs or administrative jobs online. Once the victims submitted their information, the doctor used it as leverage, threatening to distribute their private photos to their families, schools, and local communities unless they complied with ongoing demands. The scale of this operation was out of control. Investigative journalists and forensic analysts tracked over 74 confirmed victims across the various rooms, at least 16 of whom were underage minors. The content generated through their exploitation was distributed across a network of pay-to-enter chat rooms, drawing an estimated audience of 260,000 registered user IDs. Now, to access these spaces, users were required to pay a lot of money, ranging up to 1.5 million won, which is approximately 1,200 USD, and processed entirely through anonymous cryptocurrency transactions across multiple digital wallets. Cho Ju-bin, aka the Doctor, organized these channels into a 3-tiered subscription system. Higher payment tiers granted users premium access to execute real-time commands and view increasingly severe material. Within this network, the perpetrators not only blackmailed victims for their content, they commercialized active remote compliance to secure entry and retain status within the premium tiers. Users demanded proof that the victims were under absolute control. Victims were forced to perform highly specific, dehumanizing physical actions on camera to verify that the media was being produced in real time under duress. Sometimes victims were forced to hurt themselves and their pets as well. Forensic evidence and trial testimonies confirmed that victims were coerced into writing the word slave directly onto their bodies, or were recorded with bags over their heads with red strings tied around their limbs, while being forced to verbally state, "I am the doctor's slave." By late 2019, the walls began to close in on the architects of the nth rooms. The initial cracks in their anonymity didn't come from law enforcement, but from the relentless undercover bravery of investigative journalists, specifically the Hankyoreh newspaper, and 2 female college students operating under the pseudonym Team Flame. They infiltrated the encrypted chat rooms, documenting the tiers, the crypto transactions, and the identities of the victims, forcing a historically indifferent system to finally take notice. In March 2020, the cyber unit of the Seoul Metropolitan Police Station launched a massive coordinated raid. Cho Ju-bin was arrested outside his apartment. In a calculated, bizarre public spectacle during his perp walk to the prosecutor's office, he wore a neck brace and thanked the media for, quote, putting an end to the life of a devil that couldn't be stopped. But the courts saw right through this blatant performance. In October 2021, South Korea's Supreme Court finalized a staggering 42-year prison sentence for Cho, cementing his conviction not just for the cybercrimes, but for running a criminal organization under the law. With the doctor behind bars, the digital crime unit turned toward the man who started it all. In May 2020, after months of digital tracking, police arrested Moon Hyung-wook, God, the quiet 24-year-old engineering student who had built the original numbered rooms. He had believed that walking away a year prior had cleared his tracks. He was wrong, and was sentenced to 34 years in prison. The fallout didn't stop there either. The South Korean government launched a nationwide crackdown, tracking down the digital footprint of the men in the tiered rooms. Police investigated over 3,000 individuals, arresting moderators, active spenders, and casual users who thought their cryptocurrency wallets bought them permanent anonymity. The demise of the nth rooms proved that the digital screen is not always an impenetrable shield. But an underlying question remains. Who will be the next predator to use the nth room blueprint, if that hasn't already happened? The case marked a definitive shift into an almost corporate style of digital abuse. From God's initial creation to the doctor's seemingly impenetrable system, an unfortunate precedent was established, showing that criminal syndicates could automate the grooming pipeline like an MLM downline and create a highly profitable digital marketplace. And now we're going to move on to the local predator, the Swedish internet grooming cases. These cases happen at the local level. The evolution of image-based cyber extortion, or sextortion as sometimes referred to, has transitioned from decentralized online harassment into a highly calculated method of physical and emotional coercion. Investigations by European law enforcement, the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention, and detailed investigative broadcasting via outlets like P3 Krim map out how modern serial predators utilize social media infrastructure to capture and control their targets. And these networks frequently operate in the open, using popular applications such as Snapchat, Instagram, and Kik to orchestrate targeted manipulation campaigns. Legal case files demonstrate that modern sextortion operations often mimic large-scale data management. Rather than pursuing single targets, perpetrators systematically construct a localized digital Rolodex of sorts. Once a communication channel is opened up with a target, often using a catfished fellow peer identity, the perpetrator immediately takes down all the victim's information, including public social circles and followers. After trust is gained and an intimate photograph is acquired, it is instantly weaponized. The blackmailer shifts from peer-level manipulation to a highly structural ultimatum: compliance or the immediate dissemination of the compromised material to specific people on their contact list. To a minor or young adult, the threat of this humiliating possibility of social death overrides the usual self-preservation mechanisms that happen in a person. While public perception frequently categorizes cyber extortion as a purely virtual threat, criminal intelligence confirms that the ultimate objective for localized serial predators is often real-world domination. Investigative dossiers compiled during major regional prosecutions outline a rigid pipeline of physical escalation. Perpetrators almost never stop at a single photograph. The initial compromise is used as leverage to demand increasingly explicit material or compliance of different commands, reinforcing total submission. Once psychological captivity is achieved by these predators, the threat of public exposure is then leveraged to force physical encounters. Court testimonies from survivors document victims being coerced into meeting perpetrators in cars, budget hotels, or secluded municipal areas within their own local towns. In one investigation, a serial predator targeted a young girl by splitting himself into two completely different online personas. Under one account, he was the monster, contacting her out of the blue and flashing her own leaked photographs, and then threatening to ruin her life if she didn't get into a car to meet him. But before he did any of that, under a different account, he posed as her supportive, peer-aged online friend, and successfully coerced her into taking these later so-called leaked photos. While she was panicking, she would turn to this friend for comfort, and this predator friend would systematically manipulate her, telling her, "It's going to be fine, just go meet him and get it over with. He will probably leave you alone after that and give you back the photo." He used her need for a safe space to walk her directly into his own trap, which he was unfortunately successful with. Upon execution of a search warrant, forensic analysts routinely recover huge, detailed directories containing the personal data, schedules, and compromised media of dozens, sometimes hundreds of local victims. And this is the current terrifying reality. It shows that the tactics used globally have been localized into an everyday, smartphone-driven trap. The phone book full of victims recovered by the Swedish police mirrors the actions of Dominique Pellicott, who had cataloged and archived videos of more than 200 rapes of his unconscious wife in that folder neatly labeled abuse. Now, zooming out here, we have to recognize that the erasure of women's autonomy and consent isn't some new phenomenon invented by the internet. Society primed us for this from childhood. If we look back at the pop culture of the 1990s and early 2000s, we see an era that actively laid the groundwork for this misogyny. Many of us grew up watching the sitcom Family Matters, where the character of Steve Urkel relentlessly stalked, harassed, and basically wore down Laura Winslow. For years, network television packaged a guy completely overriding a woman's no as charming and cute, while nerdy, but still. In reality, it was destructive and kinda dehumanizing, right? It taught an entire generation of impressionable viewers that a woman's function is simply to basically be a love interest to be conquered, an empty vessel for a man's projections. And it wasn't just sitcoms either. The media landscape of the 90s, from teen magazines to music, was built on a cultural bitchification that punished women as they tried to gain power in society. While the decade started with fierce, activist female musicians and powerful unified supermodels, the culture quickly shifted due to the misogynistic structures lurking just underneath the surface. The industry quickly overrode the girl power vibe with waifish, underweight models and highly sexualized pop stars who weren't really even allowed to speak up for themselves, without severe backlash, of course. At the same time, the rise of lad culture, which apparently first developed in the UK but then spread over English-speaking countries, was epitomized by bands like Oasis and magazines like Loaded. And this culture embraced a macho aggression built almost entirely on the ugly objectification of women. Female desire was flattened into a single, subservient function: the desire to be desired by men. And all of this blatant pop culture misogyny was like subliminal messaging that conditioned young people to believe that women must make themselves smaller, more apologetic, and of course, prioritize male pleasure above all else. You know, echoes of what we see women fighting against today. Women were expected to live male-centered lives and seek out the male gaze at all costs. It also normalized a highly dangerous idea. A woman's explicit consent isn't the final word. It's just the starting point for negotiation. But now we transition from the television screen to the architecture of modern technology. When the internet and artificial intelligence were built, they clearly were built in with this misogynistic ideal in mind. As researcher and author Laura Bates points out, technology often promises progress, but it actually entrenches deep-seated inequalities, actively reinventing and hardwiring sexes into our lives and digital futures. And the men who engineered these systems, these AI systems, clearly codified their own biases into them. Look at early digital assistants like Alexa or Siri. By default, they were given submissive, compliant female identities, and they were actively trained to politely accept verbal abuse from users. Furthermore, social media algorithms were explicitly designed to maximize engagement, and because outrage and anger generates clicks and money, these platforms made misogyny not only highly visible, but massively profitable too. And when you take a couple of generations raised with the 90s and early 2000s pop culture mindset and drop them into the anonymous, algorithmic echo chambers of the internet, women kind of stop being human altogether. I would go as far as to say that they're reduced to NPCs, non-player characters. In case any listeners are unfamiliar with this term, well, in video games, an NPC is a mindless object built solely to serve the main character's quest. You can't hurt an NPC's feelings. They don't really matter, and they certainly don't have autonomy. The highly unmoderated spaces known as the manosphere train men through content and ridiculous paid programs to see actual women as unfunctional, unworthy tokens. In the darkest, most disturbing crooks of the internet, users even refer to women as femoids, constructing them as subhuman creatures to justify any violence enacted upon them. We spoke about men who identify as incels, who are the people who most often use terms like femoids, in episodes 6 and, if I'm not mistaken, 7. I'm not saying those two words together. The overall message of the manosphere is that women are merely objects to be used or conquered, and then thrown away. And this is often done for the approval of other men, which I just find fascinating. This brings us to how these anonymous chat rooms on platforms like Coco.fr or Motherless.com actually operate and seek the approval of each other. When CNN investigative journalists infiltrated the private Telegram group linked to the Pellicott case, they didn't just find some randos in group chats. What they found was a creepy type of brotherhood. These spaces facilitate almost like a parasocial relationship between members. They've never met, yet they're nearly giddy to approve each other's disgusting acts, idolizing one another's crimes. Men who feel socially isolated or insecure find a sense of belonging in these corners of the internet. Back and forth went hundreds of messages a day, giving each other tips on how best to drug their partners, treating videos, and actively encouraging each other's crimes. Once these men are wrapped up in the digital tribe, their individual morality is completely swallowed by a collective digital groupthink. As psychologists evaluating the Pellicott defendants noted, the perpetrators fed on a collective energy that allowed them to normalize the horrific abuse. They were trauma bonding with each other over the shared trauma and degradation that they themselves were inflicting upon women in their lives, weaponizing a sociopathic lack of empathy just to feel included in their little online peer group. And that collective digital groupthink is the thread that links every single horrific act that we discussed today. It is the operating system for what is being referred to as the digital age of misogyny. When you look closely, the walls between these crimes are paper thin. The same toxic entitlement that allowed over 70 ordinary, everyday men to walk into Dominique Pellicott's bedroom in France is the exact same entitlement driving a user to put on a pair of meta glasses and passively film an unsuspecting woman on a local bus to humiliate her later online, or worse. It is the exact same subhuman detachment that allows a tech-savvy former friend named Mike to look at someone who had been a genuine friend like Taylor and strip away her identity with generative AI, treating her face like a disposable piece of digital asset to use, and for millions of other strangers to consume. And it is that same cruelty that allows predators to target young children through a smartphone screen and use a single webcam image to build a lifelong psychological prison of sextortion. A prison so terrifying it has driven some young girls in Sweden to walk out of their front doors and into the vehicles of dangerous predators, and others to take their own lives. From the webcam blueprint of 2012, up through the digital rape academies of the nth rooms, and also up to today, it can be seen that the algorithm gods have a plan. The expertise of abusing women and girls has evolved, and gendered violence online is constantly on the rise. Technology did not invent misogyny, we know that. It did, however, turn the erasure of female consent into a gamified, monetized, and normalized social ritual for an audience of men. You know, we want to believe that the villains of these stories are rare and shadowy but obvious monsters, easy to sight from a mile away. We want to believe that they're anomalies. But the statistics, the court records, and the broken lives all of this leaves behind tells a far more uncomfortable truth. The monsters aren't hiding in the shadows. They're sitting in the supermarket. They're riding next to you on the train. They're living in your college dorm, studying for exams and checking their notifications at the kitchen table. They're hiding in plain sight. And just like with misogyny, the digital age didn't create a new type of predator. It just gave the old ones easier, more covert access. As the countless survivors of this exploitative digital warfare have proven to the world, the pixels are very real, and very responsible for very real actions. The scars are permanent, and they fight to reclaim women's and girls' humanity and autonomy from this nightmare that has only just begun. Thank you so much for listening to such a heavy episode of Great in the Sack. My sources and socials, as always, can be found in the show notes. I wonder what the next show will be about. If you have any suggestions, drop an email at greatinthesackpod@proton.me. And as always, stay vigilant, stay vocal, because silence is complicity. See you next time.